Welcome back everyone to the streets of Baku for your qualifying report for the Formula 1 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. First up, for those who have not watched Quali, a huge spoiler warning because this was an incredible qualifying session. I know I normally say they're good, but I am being deadly serious. If you have not seen it, go and watch the highlights and then come back to this review because quite frankly, today's session was a bit mental. I loved it. We've got a mixed up grid, more than one red flag. That in itself tells you how good today's session was. But as always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe, like if you enjoy. Spoiler warning out of the way, here is your result for the Azerbaijan 2021 qualifying session. And there you go. Don't I look silly after saying how improbable it would be for Ferrari to get back-to-back pole positions this weekend in the preview? Ferrari have proved me wrong. Charles Leclerc, for the second time in 2021, claims pole position, and fingers crossed this time we'll actually get to start the race. Lewis Hamilton, after a really tricky start to the weekend in practice 1, practice 2 and practice 3, somehow with a late red flag was able to get that Mercedes onto the front row of the grid. Lewis was super happy, but someone a little bit more frustrated, Max Verstappen, third place for the Flying Dutchman. He knows he's got a fantastic car underneath him for tomorrow, but nevertheless is going to have to pull off some mega overtakes against two of the best drivers on the grid if he wants a chance of victory in tomorrow's race. Another star performance from Pierre Gasly leaves the Frenchman in 4th place, his best ever qualifying with AlphaTauri. Another magical performance. AlphaTauri doing something completely different to the rest of the field in the top 10. It's paid off for them. For the first time they got both cars into Q3, and again Gasly P4 is a mega result for this small Italian team. Carlos Sainz found his way into the barriers late on, bringing out that red flag with Yuki Tsunoda. However, he was able to get his Ferrari into P5, and certainly in a race like Baku where anything is possible, is in contention for a podium tomorrow. Behind Carlos Sainz was Lando Norris, 6th place for the British driver. However, a penalty is on the horizon, a 3-place penalty after ignoring red flags, taking him down to 9th place starting tomorrow's Grand Prix. In 7th was Sergio Perez, who was so frustrated he knew he had a chance at pole position today. However, like so many other drivers, not only in Q3 but in Q2 and Q1, getting caught out by a late red flag. Tsunoda, for the first time in his Formula 1 career, made it through into the top 10. Sadly for him, he crashed out at the end of the session, was part of that red flag incident with Carlos Sainz finding the barriers at turn 4. But a best career start of what would be 8th place is now 7th place thanks to that Norris penalty is a job well done, all things considered, for young Tsunoda. Behind him is that man who seems to be stuck with him all season long. Fernando Alonso, qualified 9th, will start in 8th. Norris will start 9th, and Valtteri Bottas 10th place for the Mercedes man. They were struggling anyway, but with that late red flag, again unable to improve on his initial best lap. Sebastian Vettel missed out on the top 10, and though he was frustrated that Daniel Ricciardo's red flag in Q2, I know, lots of red flags, though Seb was frustrated, I think he's actually in a very strong position, as any driver who starts outside the top 10 is allowed to start the Grand Prix on whichever tyre compound they would like, meaning Seb has the opportunity to start on the alternate strategy, and if you've been here for a while on the channel, you know how much I rate that alternate strategy, so Seb fans, don't worry just yet. A similar story for Alpine's Esteban Ocon, who like Vettel would have most likely made it into Q3 if not for Daniel Ricciardo in 13th place, again failing to get through to Q3. And I really feel for Danny Rick today. He finally seemed to have a little bit more pace than teammate Lando Norris, but when push came to shove at the end of Q2, the Honey Badger himself found the wall at turn 4, out of the session, causing Vettel, Ocon, Raikkonen and also Russell, who are out in Q2, to not improve on their final laps. Latifi, Schumacher and Mazepin all finished in Q1 but didn't make it through to Q2. Giovinazzi and Stroll failed to set a lap time and will round out your grid for tomorrow's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And as we move over to our qualifying roundup, what was that? That was just pure Baku bonkers. And that's why we love Baku. Well done, Baku. Once again, I can't really fault that qualifying session. There's lots to go through though, and where else can we start than Ferrari? I gave them my fair share of doubt heading into this weekend. I thought Monaco was a bit of a blip. Would they have been on pole without that late red flag? Possibly. That lap from Charles Leclerc with a slight toe from Lewis Hamilton was almost inch perfect. And in all fairness to Charles Leclerc, he put on a mega performance today to secure his second pole position in a row. Something I just still cannot believe I am saying out loud. But fingers crossed, he actually gets to start the race this time. Something Ferrari will have to be wary of is their tyre degradation. Out of all of the teams, they seem to be struggling the most out of anyone on the grid, except Haas, who have their own issues this season. So keep an eye on Leclerc for the fight for the victory, and Sainz. We all know what Baku is like in races. Even if you saw F2 today, you know how carnage it can be. So there's opportunities for them tomorrow, but degradation I think will be their real Achilles heel in this Grand Prix. For Sainz, P5, it's another solid effort, but that crash at the end of Q3, I'm sure he will be very frustrated. He will not be happy watching that one back. But once again, going into tomorrow, so many of these drivers that had a crash today haven't had terrible results, and actually will have to keep in mind, points are on Sunday. Pole and 5th, a great job for Ferrari. It's 2nd place for Lewis Hamilton, 10th place for Valtteri Bottas. Is that a good day for Mercedes? You look in the context of the season, it's definitely not a good day. This is a team that have been conditioned to win, are relentless at winning. 2nd place, normally they would be very frustrated, and 10th place, crikey, if this was any other weekend, we would be saying how terrible a performance that was from Valtteri Bottas. But Mercedes all weekend long have been having issues. That red flag came out, and I think we were never really able to see that pace from Bottas, even if he was not quite on the level of Hamilton this weekend. But Lewis, where has that 2nd place come from? He's the king of making moments like this happen. He's done it again, but I actually think a big part of why Hamilton was 2nd and would have been in the fight for pole position anyway without the red flag is that change of setup he made going into qualifying. Going for a completely different aero structure to Valtteri Bottas and the front and rear wing, really helping him gain a massive advantage over anyone else in that final sector, really trying to play on that strength of the Mercedes on that part of the circuit, and it paid off. 2nd place, only a couple of tenths off pole, and is definitely in the hunt for victory tomorrow. For Bottas, it's like we've said in so many races this year, he's got to fight his way through the field because already that championship is slipping through his fingers. And if indeed he doesn't score big, surely the championship dream is over. I'm sure some of you would say it is already, and I find myself really intrigued to see what Valtteri can do tomorrow. Red Bull, it's 3rd for Max Verstappen, 7th for Sergio Perez. They know they had a car that could have been on pole position today. They will start 3rd and 6th, so there's room for improvement. Verstappen will be confident he can take victory if he can nail some of those overtakes. But again, on Lewis Hamilton, on Charles Leclerc, 2 of the quickest guys on the grid, it's going to have to be a pretty special performance from Verstappen to take victory tomorrow. For Checo though, I really do feel for him because it looked like for the first time this year, he was nailed on to be in the fight for pole. And though Max Verstappen, like Hamilton, is so good in just finding that extra little tenth or two at the end of Q3, and Verstappen most likely would have been able to do that, I just feel so frustrated for Checo because he never really had the opportunity to do that. He starts 6th on a weekend where he could have started on the front row. He is so good here in Baku. He's another driver. I'm excited to see what he can do in the race. But again, for a guy who just needs that little bit of love, that one result to give him that bit of mojo, bit of confidence, I'm just really gutted for him because I think he could have done such a great job if that red flag didn't come out at the end of Q2. But a driver that was able to take full advantage of the carnage going around him was Pierre Gasly. AlphaTauri with both cars into Q3 for the first time this season, trying something different, and it's something that Haas always used to do a long time ago now. When they got into Q3, I know we're really stretching here, they would always send their cars out with about 4 or 5 minutes to go, and why they would do that is to make sure there's no issue of yellow flags unless it's their own car. And in Haas's case, yes, that did happen quite often, but AlphaTauri took the exact same approach today. Gasly and Tsunoda out that little bit earlier, with Tsunoda leading Gasly, giving Pierre that toe. If he'd have braked a little bit more, Gasly could have been on the front row, but that would have meant Tsunoda wouldn't have been 8th, now starting 7th. So, in all fairness to AlphaTauri, that played perfectly for them. And you kind of look at the other teams, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but seeing how many crashes and incidents were going on, AlphaTauri have played a blinder. I suppose the way you can counteract though is by saying, well, it was Tsunoda who had the crash, who caused the red flag. So that obviously helped AlphaTauri. Tsunoda, though, a great job getting into Q3. He's a man that just needs, just like Perez, that one result just to lift him up a little bit. And I think even with today's crash, that's a really solid performance in terms of lap time and getting through to Q3 in the first place at his first ever time in Baku. And once again, just in case you've not heard me mention this a million times already, just how good is Gasly driving at the moment. 4th place, and definitely is my outside contender. Probably isn't even outside contender for a podium tomorrow. Come on, Pierre. But once again, we need to go from the highs to the lows because McLaren, it wasn't a good session for them. Daniel Ricciardo bringing out that red flag at the end of Q2. 13th place again. I mentioned it earlier. It finally looked like this weekend he would have that slight edge over Lando Norris. It didn't come to fruition out in Q2. But we know how good Ricciardo can be at Baku, a circuit where you can overtake, unlike Monaco. So don't write him off just yet. And Lando Norris finished 6th, but gets a 3-place penalty for ignoring red flags. That car looks good, but work to do tomorrow for the Papaya cars. It was a much better result this weekend, however, for Alpine. Their drivers tomorrow, Alonso, will start 8th, Ocon 12th, and what Alpine have here is a real nice mixture of strategy. Both of their drivers, one of the few teams that this actually happened to all weekend, were able to keep their noses clean. And Fernando gets his best result ever in Baku, his best quali result of the season, and Ocon, unlucky to not get through to Q3, wasn't able to set that lap with Sebastian Vettel at the end of Q2. But I really do rate the alternate strategy here. Mediums. If there's a crash at the start of the race, jump on the hard tyres. Go as long as you can. Go onto the soft tyres and do a couple of soft stints. It just gives you those few more options. And if there's no incidents, hey, do a 1-stop when other cars need to do a 2-stop. And for a team like Alpine that will be aware in the constructors, Ferrari and McLaren are just that little bit too far ahead. Their focus will be on Aston Martin, who they will like to think they will have the better of this weekend, and AlphaTauri, who sadly for Alpine have done a much better job. There's still a good chance that one of their cars could get into the points tomorrow. I'm not sure the same can be said for Aston Martin. Lance Stroll finding the barriers almost instantaneously at the start of quali, not a single lap, red flag out of the session. For Seb Vettel, I feel like we've already spoke about him an awful lot today, even though we've not spoke about Aston all that much. I'm confident he can do well. He had a great result, a fantastic result last time out in Monaco. I think that's really brought up his confidence, and you've just heard my half-an-hour TED talk on how good the alternate strategy is, and he's at the front of that group. So points are definitely a possibility, but I think a bit more likely for other quicker cars around the Aston boys. Alfa Romeo. Giovinazzi, like Stroll, found the barriers very quickly in quali, brought out our second red flag, and considering I made the decision to put him in my fantasy team this weekend, I was not a happy bunny, but also for Gio, who had been on a great bit of form in quali, he'll be annoyed at himself that he caused a red flag. And for Raikkonen, a quiet day. Got through to Q2, wasn't able to set a lap anywhere near a representative pace due to Ricciardo's red flag. A similar story at Williams with Latifi not making it through to Q2, Russell not able to make a lap time count in Q2 thanks to that Ricciardo red flag, Schumacher just outqualified Mazepin, but both cars setting some okay lap times, and with 5 minutes to go, it looked like if there was any kind of incident, they could get through to Q2. It didn't come to play, but a great opportunity for all of these teams at the back. Keep your noses clean tomorrow, boys. Points could be on the horizon. But before we go, let's take a look at Driver of the Day and ones to watch. Plenty of candidates for Driver of the Day, but just in case I've not said it a million times already, my driver, I'm sorry, I had to go with him, Pierre Gasly. My superstar of qualifying for 2 weekends in a row, his best qualifying for AlphaTauri. The fact it's an AlphaTauri in 4th place, and I have no issues if you want to give your driver of the day to Leclerc, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Alonso, Vettel, Russell. But not only was I impressed with the performance from Gasly, but AlphaTauri making that decision to go out that little bit earlier with all the carnage going on. Credit where credit's due. It's my pick anyway, so leave me alone. Feel free to shout at me in the comment section down below and leave your driver of the day and your ones to watch. I have gone with Sergio Perez, the man I thought would be starting on the front row. Starts 6th tomorrow. We know how good he is here. Valtteri Bottas will start 10th with a lot of work to do. Giovinazzi, who's been on a good run of form, crashed in quali, caused that red flag. 19th. Could he bring a surprise in the race tomorrow? And your racing reviews, ones to watch for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, is Daniel Ricciardo. I think he was teeing himself up today for a good quali before that crash. Alternate strategy. King of the late breakers, the circuit where he got that name. I think he could have a good little race, but we're going to have to wait and see. It's less than 24 hours to go until 1 o'clock tomorrow, British time, for the 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Let me know your predictions in the comment section down below. As always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe, like if you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.